It will be interesting because it's a very strong panel. We're told that we shouldn't be too formal because you already had your drinks, you don't had your, well, not everybody has your ties. We'll try to include you, the audience, to this conversation, but we're quite many, so we'll have to be brief, and also you will have to be brief with your interventions, comments, and questions. My name is Leonard Kucic. I'll be the moderator of this panel. I'm a journalist, podcaster, and commentator, and I've been following this strange intersection of media, technology, and society for almost 15 years. And the title is Fake News, Algorithm, and Editors. But this term fake news, before we start to quarrel, like what do we mean by fake news, and it's nothing new, and why are we talking about it now? I'd really like to ask everybody of you first to introduce briefly yourself, and then just tell me what you mean when you say fake news. Is it Breitbart? Is it Trump? Is it photoshopping images of refugees? Is it Ukraine? Is it, I don't know, bad advertisement? So what it is, and maybe we should start with Mr. D'Ancona.
Well, good evening. My name is Matthew D'Ancona. I'm a British journalist, and I guess I'm here mainly because I've just published a book about post-truth, which I guess is the broader context of this whole debate. I define fake news quite straightforwardly, not as spin or lies, but as content that is deliberately manufactured for commercial, financial, or political advantage. That's it.
Yeah, so just go on.
Okay, well...
I mean, next one. Sorry.
Yeah, next person.
Yes, next person.
Sorry. Hi. My name is Nabil Wakim. I'm the director of editorial innovation at Le Monde, which basically means I'm in charge of the internet. So I'm a journalist in Paris, and as I'm sure you know, we had a presidential election this year, and as in many presidential elections in Europe and North America, we had to struggle with the question of fake news, and I can't agree more with my colleague. I think fake news is a broad term, a broad expression, but everything that is politically or commercially motivated, misleading information can enter in this expression. And I guess we'll give more example later on.
Thank you. My name is Melita Jupeuț, a journalist at heart and by profession. You know what they say, once a journalist, always a journalist. But then again, they say that also for politicians, and I used to be both. I have served 2 terms in the Slovenian National Assembly. I have worked as a spokesperson, public relations officer, advisor to the President of the Republic, currently working as a senior advisor at Pristop Ljubljana. Fake news is a global phenomenon of many shapes and forms. I would point out 3 of them. It has become a buzzword in political discourse. It's very easy to dismiss your opponent just by saying, oh, what you're saying is just fake news. Fake news is also, I see it as a symptom of a wider change in political sphere, societies, institutional frameworks. And thirdly, it is also a strategic toolkit for certain groups to undermine their adversaries. What I mean by that is I would like to point out the potential security angle of this phenomena, but I think we'll have a lot of time to discuss this later on. Thank you.
Mr. Kropsch?
Yeah, good evening. I'm Peter Kropsch, and I must say I'm very happy that there are more people in the audience than on the panel, which I was not sure. So my function is I'm the CEO of the German press agency, which is actually, I would say, the fourth biggest news agency in the world. Originally, I'm Austrian. So fake news for us, you can imagine, we are in the core of the news business. We are a distributor. We are kind of a trusted source within the media business, and therefore fake news keep us busy. And the things that keep us most busy are, as my panelists, my four panelists said, things there which have an intention to move a communication claim in a certain direction, and this is usually found around people searching for political or for economic power, and this is the thing that keeps us busy, and it's quite a big topic for us, and I'm very, very looking forward to discuss this with you this evening.
Our next person, Ms. Czech, who is probably the most exposed here in the panel because she's the only representative of the big, bad technology companies who threaten to, destroy media business all the time. But we said that we should not put all, our darts into her. But still.
Yes. Thanks a lot. I'm Gabi Czech, covering public policy for Facebook in the region of Central Eastern Europe. Originally, I'm Hungarian, coming from London. And false news is a kind of a popular term. It's really good to start this discussion with whether they're able to define it at all, because there is no one generally accepted term for false news. Some people even say that fake news is everything that I don't agree with. Some others say that fake news is a phenomena that aims to protect the establishment and to suppress the dissent voices. For us, when we try to work with the popular term false news, we are addressing hoaxes, we are addressing disinformation, we are addressing conspiratory theories, but more in general, those information pieces that deliberately serve misinformation, deliberate, systematic. It's either for financial goals or political goals. What we see on our platform is that false news is a very, very tiny minority compared to the vast amount of content that goes on Facebook. And most of this is financially motivated. Though I understand that the real sensitivity here usually is about the content that is politically motivated. And it's very strongly connected with security issues, as you mentioned as well.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ingrid Brodnig. I have a Slovenian second name, but I'm from Austria. I published a book called Lügen im Netz. So it's called Lies on the Internet, and it's about propaganda and manipulation online. And to answer the question, what is fake news, I must say you all have given a great definition. I think we are on the same page here. I would say fake news is just the tip of the iceberg. So I would say we are moving into a new ecosystem where there are new players using very unjournalistic, often very unfair methods to gain attention or to gain profit or to gain political followers. And these made-up stories, which are called fake news, are just the tip of the icebergs. The bigger part are actually misleading stories, hyper-partisan stories, and that being said, also in Europe, fake news are a real problem. I would just want to give you one example. We all know that in the US election, fake news played a role. I don't know if all of you know that in Italy, for example, fake news also have played a big role. There was an interesting analysis of the referendum in Italy, if you remember, last December. Italy decided if they should change the constitution, and the fact-checkers from Pagella Politica, they made an analysis of the 10 most successful stories on social media about the referendum. And of those 10 stories, 5 of them were false or misleading. And the most successful story about the referendum was fake news. The most successful story in Italy about the referendum was a made-up story that 500,000 ballots, 500,000 votes have been found beforehand. This story suggested there would be a huge fraud, and this story was completely made up. So I would say fake news are also a real problem in Europe for all of us.
I would like to ask you, the public, if you believe that you are able to detect news that do not have a clear brand of fact-checking background. Maybe you would like to raise the hand for a moment. Do you believe that you're able to detect news that does not have a brand of fact-checking behind it? Are you? Who believes that you are able to detect? 1, 2, 3. And I see a big majority, tremendous majority, that seems to feel that you're not able to detect. That is part of the drama. I'm Florian Nehm from the Axel Springer Group in Berlin. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Teodor Marjanović. I'm from Prague, from Czechia. Here's a proof, I drink beer. So, I'm a reporter with a major newspaper in my country, and I write a lot about Russian propaganda in my country. And I think we are going to talk tonight a lot about this type of fake news. I'm talking about fake news that is actually intended to undermine the belief in democracy, democratic institutions. These kind of news, if we should call them news actually, are really a menace and should somehow be limited or somehow diminished. And nobody knows actually how to do it. So I'm looking forward to having a discussion with all of you here and have fun tonight.
Well, thank you all for these first answers, because we really needed to answer this question in order to see how to frame this debate, because fake news can be treated as many different aspects. For example, Ms. Czech, Facebook treated fake news, at least at first, or for quite many years, as a technical problem, as something that can be detected and then removed by algorithms and easily flagged, and now it proved to be more complicated. So is it a technical problem, or is it more than a technical problem?
Let me start with saying that it is not a Facebook problem. It is not an issue that was born on Facebook, but it doesn't mean that I want to shy away from the conversation, or that we as Facebook want to shy away from a responsibility that our platform has when we have to tackle false news. False news, when we talk about false news, we are talking about news, we are talking about stories, we are talking about content. Facebook is a technological company. For us, when we are looking at the financial incentives of fake news, that we can detect in traffic, that we can detect in the financial incentives, and how can we cut those incentives. When we are talking about the politically motivated fake news, then that's most of the time that is very strongly connected to authenticity, authenticity of accounts. We are talking about fake accounts, mass creation of fake accounts, and coordinated action of these fake accounts to disseminate sensationalist stories, to disseminate fake facts or alternative reality. So for us, we don't see that kind of banning content would be the right direction to go to. It is for us, whenever we are able to have a good solution, it has to be a technical solution. The real life problem is not a technical problem. It's a very complex problem. It is a societal problem where governments, publishers, NGOs, digital industry has to work together to find out how can we tackle and respond, how can we educate users, how can we work collaboratively. But we, as a technical platform, we can tackle it successfully if we are able to identify the technicalities behind it. Let me just give you one short example. When we see, 2 months ago, we introduced a new tool that helps us to identify and remove pieces of content in the newsfeed that is spread by an extremely high amount of individual accounts in a higher than normal frequency, meaning that we are able to identify spammy content on the newsfeed that is spread out in a more than the usual amount, because there is a normal volume how people interact on Facebook. So when we are able to detect what is different than normal, then we might be on the right track. And then we are able to, and that's what now we are doing, that we are decreasing the visibility of those pieces in the newsfeed. Of those pieces that were published by accounts in a vast amount, and those contents that are not shared in a normal way of pattern by other users, because users kind of spot a lot of the fake news. So when we see that there is a piece of content that looked at and then not shared, not interacted with, then that's as well a technical sign for us that there is a high chance that that piece of information is false news. Of course, we have to be very, very careful because whenever we are whenever we are interacting with content, that as well means that we are in the dangerous slippery slope of censoring content, of suppressing voices, and so on. And I'd love to talk about it later.
Well, thank you. At the DPA, you probably have different sorts of algorithms of how to sort and flag and...
No, what I originally wanted to do is to answer something on this Facebook statement, because for me that was completely oversimplified. Yeah, so Facebook for me is kind of, you might know this poem, The Wizard Apprentice. You know The Wizard Apprentice? It was the apprentice of the wizard. Is awakening the wizard brooms and make it servants, yeah, because the wizard is out, yeah, and then he cannot control these brooms anymore, and they do things which he never had expected. And I think that's exactly the position of Facebook, yeah. Facebook has interfered in the business models of media and their public. So it's nice. It's clear you said very, very frankly that it's an economic model. It's about money, yeah. But saying then I am a technical platform and whatever is going on the technical platform is for a company like Facebook completely oversimplified, yeah. I think that, so we see what Facebook is doing, yeah. Facebook is trying to convince trusted media brands to do the fact-checking on Facebook. Yeah, this is for some reason. This is not because it comes originally or it comes naturally. I think this is a kind of a desperate need to get the brooms of the wizard back in the cupboard. Yeah, that is the position of Facebook, and it makes the situation a lot more complicated than it must be.
Mr. Hakim.
I can explain a little bit about this because we've been partners in France with Facebook in fighting back against fake news, and I guess most of the audience is not necessarily aware of it, but in France and Germany and also in the US, Facebook created a program with partners where newsrooms, let's start from the beginning. Users can flag news in their news feed and say, hey, we think this is fake. And then it gets into a tool where we see all this news and then we can verify them. And we can say, hey, this is fake. And in France, the way it works is that if 2 newsrooms participating in the program say, this is false, not only misleading, really completely false, then this story gets a strong minus in the algorithm of Facebook. So we've been working with Facebook for months about this, and I completely give credit to Facebook for doing that, which is, I think, not easy for a company to say, hey, I'm going to modify my algorithm in order to do that. To be completely honest, it's not working well. The tool is not good, but the intention is good. What I think would be a better idea is, in order to, there is a positive way to think about it. What we should do collectively is not only fight back against fake news. What we should do is promote real stories, stories that matter to people, stories that are really fact-checked, that are done by real journalists with an ethical background. And so this is a conversation we've been having with Facebook and Google and other platforms, which is, how do we make a difference between stories that are completely bogus or politically motivated, commercially motivated, misleading people, creating social and tense situations in some countries? How can we do the opposite? How can we promote good stories, stories that make sense? And I think this is the question we should be talking about. The real tools to fight back against fake news is to build trust between us, journalists that do a real job, not Russian-backed media, not politically motivated militants, real journalists doing their real job, and the readers. A lot of them have lost faith in what we do, and so we have to think about this. But then also a lot of them, their primary source of information right now is Facebook, or it's Google News, or it's Snapchat. And so we have to work together. I totally understand what you say. Of course, it's too easy for Facebook to say, hey, it's a technical question, we're just a platform, we know this debate. But the truth is, there is no other option. We have to work together. We create content, Facebook or Google, they distribute this content, so we have to find a way to work together. And of course, there is a business model issue. It's a huge business model issue, especially for us, the media companies, because otherwise we will just disappear. But it's also a democratic issue. If we want societies that are able to have quality debate to advance collectively, we need media companies, publishers, and platforms to work together in a smart way. We're not quite there yet, but I'm a very optimistic person.
Well, I'm very pessimistic about what you are saying, because I'm working in a newsroom, and if I imagine myself, my daily load of work, and then having a request from Facebook to spend additionally an hour or two on checking a story, whether it's correct or not, I would be overwhelmed. It's too much to do. And newsrooms are shrinking generally. So you cannot expect media, the brand media, the respected media, to do this job, basically. This is not the way to go forward. So my question is whether the state should step in. And then we go to this debate about possible censorship. But if there is anybody who has the resources in order to give, to find people to do this job and to alarm Facebook, hey, this is false and you should put it down, then who else than the state actors should do it? We have, you disagree, I know, but we have such a body in Czech Republic that was established in January. It's a 20-people department that works in the Ministry of Interior that publishes, say, two reports per month, not much, about some fake stories. And they are basically working against the Russian propaganda media outlets that are active in my country. So I think they have been quite useful, and I'm happy to have them. I don't see any other way, actually, than to find other actors than media, because media cannot fulfill this role anymore.
Yeah, Mr. Name would probably disagree.
Absolutely, yes, thank you. It's a question of free speech. Now, have you ever thought how fact-checked news come to your mobile phone and to your newspaper at the breakfast table? It is journalistic enterprises who have branded credibility and fact-checking teams. As you said, that is the core of journalistic brands. And the question of this evening, one of the questions is, do we still need editors? And the answer is 100 times yes, 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 because there you have fact-checking, and if there are mistakes, the competitors will correct it. The rest is free speech, even the freedom to speak stupidities. Now, hate speech is another thing that is being dealt in various ways, but of course, where do we go if we now have truth ministries in governments, etc., etc.? Absolutely not. There is a proposal by Jean-Claude Juncker, the Commission, that the governments, including the Slovenian government, are now studying. The Slovenian government has unfortunately not made up its mind yet. And that is to give the exclusive ownership, the copyright, to close a gap, to publishers, the journalistic enterprises, so that they own what they produce and can then ask for licenses who has commercial use for it. That would bring important financial means to do the job, as you mentioned, and you mentioned at Le Monde. Very important. This is action. No more crocodile tears, but action. And please, governments, executive branch, support this. The rest is free speech.
What this exclusive copyright is actually about.
That is, and the law says it, or the proposal of the Commission, who uses journalistic content for commercial purposes needs the permission of the producer, as in film, as in music. There is a discriminatory gap in the regulation in Europe, and the Commission is about to close it if the governments will give green light and the Parliament.
Ms. Brodnig?
Actually, I would like to take a step back because I think we're now talking about many issues at once. Mm-hmm. I think there was an interesting question raised by you. What is the reason behind all of this? What leads to this new quantity of misleading stories? And I think you're right that the biggest reason is more like a societal one, it's more a psychological one. We know from like many decades of research that there are aspects going on in our thinking which lead us to be biased towards what we want to believe. There's motivated reasoning which is happening with all of us, that when a new fact evolves and we read it, that subconsciously we rather believe it if it fits our existing beliefs. And you can show this among every group of people. So this is an important thing. People rather want to believe what fits their worldviews. And this is one of the reasons why fake news works so well, because today those misleading stories, they exploit the values of people, the fears they have. In many countries we have fake news around Muslims, around refugees, because this is a fear you can target and then you can write the right story. So you have these psychological reasons. The second thing is, from political science, we know since many years that anger is a very activating emotion. We know this from studies when it comes to voters, that when voters are angry, they rather go voting. We also know it from the internet. In English you say, angry people click more. Because when people read a content which makes them angry, it activates them. There's an interesting political scientist named Timothy Ryan from the United States, and he made an experiment. He published political advertisement on Facebook, and then he measured how often people click on it. And in some of these settings, the political advertisement would make people angry. And he found out that when political ads make people angry, people click them more than twice often than if it's more a neutral message. So when you have angry content which makes people angry, you get better click numbers, more likes, more comments, etc. Also other studies show this. And I think we should also talk about technology, because many of you are using Facebook, and we don't know all the details of Facebook's algorithm, but we know one thing, and Facebook itself says that their engagement rate is one of the most important metrics which content will be successful on Facebook. To put it very easily, if your post has 1,000 likes, much more people will see it than if your post only has 3 likes. So Facebook's algorithm is saying that when your post gets a lot of likes, it will be shown to more people. And just think about what I just told you. Content which makes people angry gets more likes. And then you have an algorithm which seemingly favors posts with many, many likes. So there are many questions here. For example, if we have algorithms which favor extremely dramatic content. So I think we need to talk about the psychology, how we humans were always prone towards fake news, which kind of helps us argue in our way, or we kind of say, you're right, we are right. But also, of course, technology can be an enhancer. Technology can even do more than that. And I think it's too easy to just go on one level or just have one suspect. I think there are many, many things at play here which unfortunately help those new players which are really trying to gain from misleading the public.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with all of that, and I think
maybe just Mr. Peutz is waiting for is that okay? Okay.
Okay, well, what I was going to say was simply this, that I think it's really important in this whole debate that we don't end up fighting the last war, metaphorically, and that we acknowledge the sheer scale of change and the pace of change that has happened in the last decade. I mean, Facebook didn't exist in 2003. Broadband was not broadly available until 2004. We have witnessed a collapse of trust in institutions around the world, principally following the financial collapse of 2008, 2009, but also generally in authority and in elites. And as yet, no one has come up with a straightforward answer to how that trust is going to be recovered, and recovered it must be. Secondly, we are looking now at the greatest technological revolution since, and possibly including the Industrial Revolution, which has been said has transformed the information ecology. The existing techniques and rules of regulation and collaboration and, to coin a phrase, partnership will not work. This is a battle and a challenge of enormous scale. And at the heart of it lies a category mistake which I made, and I put my hand up to, which was when the first wave of social media happened. It was called Web 2.0 in those days. I was incredibly idealistic, and a part of me still is, that this form of interconnectivity could lead to greater global understanding, to the spread of pluralism, to the melting of borders, and a more general understanding of different cultures. And to some extent it has succeeded in that. But let us not delude ourselves. What it has also done is that it has encouraged people to cluster in and huddle into their own bubbles, their own comfort zones. This is absolutely at the heart of the fake news post-truth debate. And this is the key. The technology that we're discussing does this not as a matter of unintended consequence, but deliberately. The algorithms are designed to give you more of what you like already. And that is a fundamentally new phenomenon in the passage of information around the world. We are moving from a pluralistic to a homogeneous system of information distribution. And until we acknowledge that the sheer scale and pace of this change, everything we say will be so much hot air. I think it is incredibly important to remain optimistic, but to do so from a position of great vigilance and realism.
Thank you. A question for the two journalists and editors, Mr. Joachim and Kropsch. One point that Ms. Brodnig makes is that if you're talking to psychologists, they would all say, well, of course people would read and click and share fake news because they fit into their existing framework. Is it also maybe a part of the reason why fact-checking does not really work as well as it's supposed? Because there is an irony during the US elections that probably never in history was so many institutions devoted to fact-checking, and it made so little impact. Why? How come? Does it make sense to talk about facts and truth?
Absolutely. Look, I think that there are limits to what tools and algorithms can do. It basically comes down to two things. One is responsibility, accountability, and the second one is trust. And this goes for social media, and it also goes for trusted old news brands. If you ask me, I see all this fake news phenomena as an excellent opportunity for good old trusted brands, for good old hard journalism. Because in my personal view, I think that at the end of the day, people still know how to separate the wheat from the chaff. So I think that they will resort to their old trusted sources of information. So I'm optimistic. I'm not saying this is the end of social media. I'm just saying that, people have their valuable sources of information, and I think that at the end of the day, they will return to these old brands. And I had a lively conversation with a colleague before this debate, whether people, the readers, will be willing to pay for this reliable source of information. I don't know the answer to that question, but I think it's going to be very hard to persuade them, look, you're paying, I don't know, £60 for a TV package. Are you willing to pay £3 for a reliable source of information? This is yet to be seen.
But does it work? I mean, because a part of this debate was also that maybe we tend to overestimate this idea of trusted media brands. Because when I'm speaking to people, somebody says, well, I read this. Where have you read it? On Facebook. Yeah, okay, but where on Facebook? What on Facebook? Was it from where? How did it come to Facebook? I don't know. It was on Facebook. So it doesn't really matter whether it was, The Guardian or his friend or somebody else. So this idea of trusted brand, what does it mean? Which brand?
I totally agree with that. I think trust is the major issue, and French people really know that. In the last report from the Reuters Institute, France is like the country where people trust less their media organization, with Greece. So that's a good lesson for us. And I guess this is where I think we have to think of course, the context has changed. Of course, Facebook and Google are here. But the question is also, how do we talk to our readers? How do we build trust with them? And I think this is the main question for us. We cannot publish our stories like we used to. We have to find ways to get our trustworthy, good quality journalism to get to these readers. And we've been working a lot on that. And I'll tell you a story. We've been redesigning our website last year, Le Monde's website. And so we had a lot of readers coming into the newsroom, and we showed them what we were working on. Most of them, and including very faithful readers, were not able to make the difference between a story, a factual story, and an opinion piece. Most of them weren't sure if it was an editorial with an opinion or it was a factual piece. This is very important. Most people on the internet don't have the journalistic grammar that we think they have. It's not because they're stupid. It's just because when you have a newspaper in your hand, it's very easy to understand which is which. You have the opinion pages, you have the facts, you have the sports. When you're on the internet, you're not coming through the homepage of the website. You're coming through Facebook, you're coming through Google, whatever. Someone sent you a link through WhatsApp. And so you don't know anything about the context. So we have to do this better. I think this fake news issue also forces us to rethink the way we present information to our readers. And that is very important. So that's the first thing. But then we also need to help our readers navigate the internet. Internet is I totally agree with Matthew. It's a great place. You find anything you want. It's full of hope for democracy and opening yourself to other cultures. But it's also a very dangerous place. And I say dangerous not only intellectually, it is dangerous on many levels. And so I guess our role now is also to help readers better understand the place where they navigate. We created last year a tool called the Décodex. It's a database of French websites where we listed thousands of French websites that we think some of them are completely bogus, some of them are not trustworthy. And this tool helps you when you navigate the internet and tells you, hey, be careful. Don't believe everything you read there because we know that this website has published fake news stories. And so I guess we need to help our readers. We need to help them navigate the world of the internet. I just think that platforms should help us do this job, but I think that we'll have time to talk about this. I just add one thing. It is not true that fact-checking does not work. Of course, if you are convinced of something, if you really think that climate change has no human cause, you can read 1,000 pieces on that and you will not change your mind. But most people don't have strong convictions on everything. And so fact-checking is really helpful into giving arguments to people who are worried, who ask themselves questions, and that is very important. Think about it. If fact-checking does not exist, if journalists don't do that job, so you can let an American candidate say that climate change has no human cause and no one is going to say anything. Of course, if we do our job and say, hey, 99.9% of the scientists of the world agree on this issue and we explain it, it will not convince hardcore Trump voters. But at least for all the others, it will give arguments for debate. And then, at the dinner table, they might convince their family.
Yeah, but not if you believe that the world is going to end anyway. So there's nothing you can do. And Ms. Brodnig?
I just wanted to add, because it's exactly what I wanted to say. I always say, no fact-checking is also no solution. So we see that some people are apparently not affected by fact-checks, but I would say these people are often a minority. When you look at the data, when you look at studies, several studies show that fact checks work, have a positive effect. And it's great that we have a colleague from France here, because during the French election, French scientists made such a study. There were scientists from Sciences Po and another university, and they showed wrong statements by Marine Le Pen to voters, and then also the real facts by the UN organization. It was about refugees. And it showed that even voters from the Front National, even they, when they got the accurate information from the official UN organization, they would rather believe the right information. So even they changed their minds. I think the problem here is, and when you look at many countries, the problem is polarization. So I think in the United States we had a tremendous amount of fake news spreading, because in a two-party system where those two parties are extremely hating each other, it's even easier to have an extreme partisanship. And in countries where you have these extreme partisans, you will have stronger factors. But I think the most dangerous thing is to say fact checks don't work, and because this leads to the next thing. I think the biggest danger we now have is that we say, are facts even existing? And we are in the middle of this debate, because we have a US presidency where the team of Donald Trump is talking about alternative facts. And I think the most important thing that we need to do now is look at the basic numbers which show fact-checking is helpful, and secondly, facts do exist. I often discuss with upset citizens online, and I talk with them, and often they write things like, yeah, but to everything there's two sides. And you can never be sure of anything. And I think for us as journalists, it's important to say, it's true that many things have two sides, or there can be different opinions on certain things, but we have to acknowledge that facts do exist. For example, it's not your opinion whether the earth is round or the earth is flat. This is not a matter of opinion. It's not a matter of opinion if the team of Hillary Clinton is having a pedophile activities in the cellar of a pizzeria, which is also a fake news story from the United States, which people believed. You can prove that this is not right. And I think we need to get back to a debate where we focus on facts which are provable. And I think that more and more in many countries this is happening. I think that in France, many newsrooms did a good job in reacting quickly towards certain fake news and helped them not being spread around too much. So if I can tell you one thing I deeply believe, we can get better. And just to sum this up, in the 19th century, there were many fake news stories in new tabloid magazines and papers. Why? Because suddenly, due to technological reforms, it became much cheaper to print mass tabloid papers. And in this time, you would have news stories which were totally made up. One news story said that in the zoo in New York, animals had gotten out and killed a lot of people. None of this was true, but it sold papers. And what happened over the next decades and the next century was that we established new norms and new, standards how we deal with such things that drove that back, which said it's not okay to just simply make something up. And I think we are now in an important period where we have to establish those new standards online because we see similar things just on a bigger level now.
But maybe not only standards, but also incentives. Because have any of you heard of the Great Moon Hoax? It's an interesting example of early media history. When American tabloids were at beginnings, it was, I think, 1835, the New York Sun, I think, published a story, with beautiful graphics that famous British astronomer Mr. Herschel actually found evidence that there is life on Moon. And it was, of course, completely fake. But it made record sales in New York at that time. And that captured the attention of a very early advertising industry called today it would be like, colloid silver and stuff. It was patented in medicine. And they found out that, well, this thing called newspaper with this fake news on the cover actually sold like tens of thousands of copies, which also means tens of thousands of households to actually sell stuff to people. And maybe we should get here back to the incentives, because here, this early example shows that there is some natural alliance between fake news and advertising. So that would be maybe a slightly evil question to Facebook, but for example, when those guys from Veles Macedonia were making up different stories about, and the crazy Americans would click on them, there are some estimates that they would make like 20 to 30,000 euro a month, which, if we know how your model works and how much stays on the platform, would mean that you profited hugely from fake news if you take business-wise. So there are incentives to do that, but are there also incentives not to do that? Because now you're in damage control, because a year ago you would not probably be here and talk about this. Now you are.
Oh, we were here a year ago as well, but it's kind of, since last year, a lot have been done on Facebook and off Facebook as well. And as I said, and as you said as well, there is no one magic tool to tackle false news, but there needs to be a systematic slicing of this issue. And one issue is how to de-incentivize the bad, how to take away the financial incentives behind hoaxes and false news. Mm-hmm. You can see false news in the ads. I'm pretty sure that if you look deep into your heart, there is nobody in the room who have never clicked on any Last Words of Diana type of ads or George Clooney is dead type of ads. When you click on that, that takes you to an ad farm. That takes you to a click house. That takes you to a video clickbait. When we identify those, then we manage to close those down. A year ago, we closed down the ad farms. We do not allow to sell likes. Just in the recent months, we do not, when we find out that there is a verified false news in an ad, we do not allow that to be spread in an advertising format. When we find out that the page is repeatedly using ads or trying using ads for spreading false news, then now we do not allow that page to use advertisement at all. So this is kind of, it is an initiation process. Facebook was built to connect friends and families, and we want to have a global engaged community. And there are effects that nobody really thought about because it is a very complex word. It is a very complex site and platform, and because users use the site in a very complex way, in a way that sometimes we do not even thought about it when our engineers made the platforms and introduced new products. So it's an ideation process where we have to understand what's going on and find ways how we react to that. Fact check. First we started with the report button. Then we started working with the fact checkers. But it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of huge resources, and just by the sheer amount of content, it just doesn't work if we are only relying on fact checking. Then we started to do the related articles. Some of you have already raised that why don't we show people what is the reality, what is the fact? People don't like to be told what they should think of. People want to read, just like in real life. You go to a pub, to friends, with whom you usually share most of your thoughts. But just like on real life and Facebook as well, you do have friends who have different views, who see the world in a different way. So like the Pew Research showed in 2016 that on Facebook people see more dissenting opinion than they see, for example, on Twitter or when they see it in offline world. So kind of the bubble can be broken, but people don't like to be mandated to opinions that they don't agree with. But what people like to see is to see alternative perspectives. So what we do now, that's as well new, that when you see an article that has been disputed, we show you as well, even before you click on that article, other news pieces that are covering the same story, but gives you a different perspective. And the initial user feedback is that people like that, they use that.
To quote Hannibal Lecter, that is very slippery of you, Agent Starling. You started off by talking about how people don't like being told what's factual, and then you very elegantly moved into the question of people not being told what to think. They're very different points. Comment is free, facts are sacred. Or to quote the great Neil deGrasse Tyson, science is what's true no matter whether you believe it or not. So please let's distinguish between fake news and diversity of opinion.
Mm-hmm. Even like one of the biggest groups on Facebook is the Earth is flat.
I think we're too many.
So even kind of, if you want to state an untrue fact in itself, that's not a crime. And I think that would be awfully bad to criminalize the truth. You can say lies, you can say stupid things. And as I said, one of the biggest groups on Facebook is the fan club of the flat of Earth. The Earth is flat. So that's even when we are talking about facts versus, or facts, how facts are related to fake news.
Since you won't admit you're hold on, but since you won't admit you're a publisher, where is your accountability when you publish fake news? You see, all the journalists around here, if they publish fake news or facts, they have different legal systems in their countries and across the globe, jurisdictions to which they're accountable. What's yours?
That's exactly the situation, that we are not publishing. You are publishing.
That's what you keep saying.
Our users are publishing. We are a platform that is distributing. It doesn't mean we don't have responsibility. It is different responsibility. And when you have a square peg, you might not need to fit it into already existing
If you're not a publisher, then why do you care?
because it's still a responsibility. And
But
because
if you're
we think-
responsible, then you're a publisher.
No, it is a different responsibility, and you can bear responsibility and have responsibility even when you don't have the legal obligation to have a responsibility. We do not have an editorial responsibility, and there are in Europe now big discussions around regulation. When you have such a new phenomena as digital platforms and digital technology, I'm pretty sure that the solution is not to fit that into existing old regulatory regimes, making them behave as if they were telecom companies or making them behave as if they were publishers. Just think about it. You all coming from big publishing houses, you remember when we introduced instant articles. Many of you even used it or use it now. One of the debate we had with instant articles, if you remember, that Facebook removed articles of big publishers because they broke our community standards. And there was a huge outcry that instant articles, that's our product. It's us. We are the editors. You are just a platform. You should not interact with our content. You should not tell us that we cannot have a photo of a nude person or certain words in the headlines. So this is a very tricky conversation. And I do think that when you as publishers, the media houses and publishing industry, they have an editorial responsibility. And it is a cradle and a very important part of building a true and strong democracy. And that is a value for Facebook as well. Even if we are not an editorial company, we as a platform, as technological platform, we do have a responsibility. And we want to live up to that responsibility. That's why we have initiated the Facebook Journalism Project. That's why we initiated the News Integrity Project, because we want to work with you guys and with other players to find out that everyone has a role to play in this complex issue.
Sorry.
Needless to say that I fully disagree, and the ground is really, really slippery, Agent Starling. I want to shift the attention a little to the economic background, yeah, because I think it's needless to say that Facebook has come to stay, and most of us would not be happy if a state would open a Ministry of Truth and things like that. But the only position for a media brand is just fact-checking and trying to hold against what is provided as fake news. For instance, even an organization like DPA with 350 people in a newsroom and 1,000 journalists worldwide, we have opened a radar office, yeah, to get awareness as soon as possible what is going on there. We opened a verification office to fact check, yeah. So what we are doing here is we are rendering public value under private governance, yeah. So that means this is the only position we could go for, but it gets more and more difficult to find the financial funds for that, yeah, because the advertising money lands at Facebook and at Google, and we are rendering the services where the money is earned otherwise. So there is this saying. Never have been so many people reading our news, and never has been the possibilities to capitalize on that so slim, yeah. So I think we have a huge issue of financing all that, because of course, as Florian said, yeah, there should be 100-wise more journalists to fight against all this, because what we see out there is Darwinism, yeah. Who has the money spreads the stories. Yeah, it's needless to say, if I would pick up, if I would say, okay, a state is responsible for just providing a kind of a truth. So if you travel through states, as many states you travel, as many truths you will find. So at the end of the day, the only really cornerstone for conversation on a which helps democracy as we know it now is free press and independent publishers, because they are going to fight for all this. Yeah? What I, as a manager of quite a company, would say what we need is business models, maybe finding also business models with those who earn the money, finding also regulations which make it easy from a state perspective to run a media company, and there is a lot to do.
Can I also raise one additional question and maybe shift the discussion a bit as well? I think that, you know, we are throwing all of fake news in one basket now. So my question would be, can we distinguish less or more harmful fake news? What I'm asking is, you have fake news which have absolutely no implications. For example, Melania was wearing high heels when she went I don't know where. Does that have any serious implications, consequences? I don't think so. If you have fake news which is published, you know, in the social media that, I don't know, a missile is flying over Japan, okay, we are talking about a different issue now. What I'm trying to say or to raise a question is, okay, is all fake news harmful? Do we have good fake news? I believe we do. But I think we should also talk about different dimensions of this fake news phenomena. I mean, not all fake news has serious implications. I mean, it's bad for the public who deserves to be informed, who deserves to have, you know, truthful information, facts, etc. So maybe a different angle, which I also think it would be good, you know, to look at it from this perspective.
Well, the big
And
question
also,
is how
sorry,
to
yeah.
de-incentivize the state or a political party. Because now we're talking about money, more or less. It's pretty easy to, let's say, no, it's not easy, but you can do something about scammers and ad farms and stuff like this. But how do you prevent a state or a political party to use this tool? So that's another question. Maybe Mr. Marjanović, because you were... And you should, if you're not speaking, you should please turn the microphone because there's only 4 channels.
Look, I agree with all of you. I mean, you said we have to educate the reader. That's fine. We have to develop new standards. Great idea. We have to have stronger newsrooms. Excellent idea. But what do you do in short run? You know, you have like a state actor, Russia, that is spreading those, developing those websites that are spreading false propaganda. It's not now, it happened yesterday in the Dutch referendum about Ukraine accession. They have been actually able to influence the public in Netherlands in order to reject it. So look, I think all those proposals are fine, but it's a long run idea. I mean, I would be very happy to educate the reader, but in the short run, I'm somehow I'm not sure if I will survive this as a journalist up to that point, because new totalitarianism might come. So that brings me back to this idea of state actors that could be somehow acceptable in some form that we should be maybe agree with, that could be part of this system that we are talking about, that should monitor what's going on Facebook, and not only on Facebook. That's my idea. And if we reject it, then what else do we have in the short run?
Maybe before we continue with this, or focus more on this role of editors, because it's also part of our discussion, I'd like to ask the audience if you have any ideas where this debate, well, should be going, if it's not going, or is it okay, or do you have any additional questions or focuses that our panelists can answer?
Okay, yeah. All right. My name is Mitja Merschol. I'm a journalist, old-fashioned journalist, and old as well. But nevertheless, I was trying to somehow to detect some meaning in the words like fake news. Don't we somehow derive the meaning of the news by saying fake news? Aren't they lies, for example? Or are we calling a state to be an editor? Whenever I thought about media and journalism, I always thought that they are sort of watchdogs and critics of a state or the government and so on. Now we want to have a state as an editor? No, I don't think we can, even if I'm an old-fashioned. And then, I think that tonight's discussion was really a good one, especially in a sense of analyzing the state of fake news or social media or whatever. But at the same time, what I missed was a kind of journalistic introspection. Introspection of journalists and editors and media, I mean traditional media and so on. Why? Because I think that introspection is needed in case of this short-run term that how should really traditional media behave in this situation? Because it's a little bit bad to say that we are disappearing because of this new situation and so on. I mean, talking about trusted old media and so on. I think it's a challenge for traditional media. It's a challenge. It's like we are talking about Brexit and European Union, and if we say Brexit is not Brexit, but it's a challenge for the European Union and so on. I think that the situation is, this kind of situation is a challenge for traditional journalism. And how we should really react to this kind of situation as journalists, as traditional media, that's a good question also maybe for tonight's panel, even it's a little bit late already, but nevertheless. And really, I think that what I miss nowadays in traditional media is that what we used to do was we were more in the field as journalists. We are not anymore. We are more digital. We are more in, we don't have newspapers. I used to be a foreign correspondent for my newspaper. Newspapers nowadays are cutting down foreign correspondence. So everything is coming then from the same sources as fake news are coming and so on. And that's the point, and that's the question for good and traditional journalism and media. Thank you so much.
On this point, I'd like to maybe challenge Mr. Nim, because I really wanted to ask him this question. I know his position because he explained it pretty in detail also, I think, in the newsletter of this Congress. But wasn't this also a part of the problem? Because you're saying that if we save media publications, if we save publishers with copyright protections, with new legislations, then media companies would actually do what they're supposed to do. But we know that especially in the 80s and the 90s, when there were like great years for, or decades for media companies, there were huge cuts of staff. A lot of journalists were laid off. Foreign correspondents were, they were closing foreign correspondents. So this idea that if you save media companies, you also save journalism is not as straightforward, I guess. And maybe also for the journalist people here, do you think that if your company would, by some sort of a miracle, return into the 90s when profits were huge and everything, would that mean that they would invest all this money into journalism and fact-checking and all the goodies?
What else? Now, the details you will find on page 16 of the Bled Times when it comes to fake news and the issue of copyright. What are journalistic enterprises? These publishers usually are families around the world. In communist countries, this tradition was a little lost, but there are many new entrepreneurs. Publishers are crazy people who do not take their money to the bank but want to publish. And there's only one business model, and that is we have content the reader wants to pay for because it's attractive and valuable. And once we have the contact with the reader, with the user, we can sell advertisement. There is no alternative. The alternatives are called branches from not publishing, banks, construction, etc. Oligarchs, very popular these days. Political parties, the state. These are the alternatives, or selling cat food. So the basis is selling content to people who want to pay and advertisement. Now, because of digital, of course it's a new challenge. We're not married to paper. We are content. And if tomorrow our users want to hear songs with news, we will hire thousands of singers who will sing the songs. We are content, not distribution. Now, because of digitalization is a new challenge, legislation needs to modernize. And one key point is this copyright thing, because it's an ownership, as in music, as in video. On paper, you could not commercially copy it on the Xerox machine. It had no value. Today, digitally, you can, in a second, copy it 1,000 times and sell it. And the Californian business models of Google, Facebook, and many others are based on this, using other people's product to do business. Now, the legislation of the Commission, partly to solve many of this financial thing, to bring it to the owners, has now proposed this. Google, Facebook, and others are protesting, and the pirates, of course, and many others, don't, free access, etc. News are free, but not for free, and we heard all the reasons today. So please, executive branch in this room of whatever European government, do not show us crocodile tears. Vote for supporting the Commission's proposal, and same in the Parliament. The members of European Parliament, vote for it. It will give the journalistic organizations here and the many others to be found. Think of Politico, is a new invention, is working fine. So the more diversity we have in this, of more crazy entrepreneurs, and it's much easier in the digital world today, these entrepreneurs will bring the journalistic enterprises the hygienic factor to it. Not the Ministry of Truth of the Ministry of whatever government. It is the dear competitors. If our newspaper writes a stupidity that is not true, etc., we hope, we need the competitors to tap and slap and protest and show how stupid this work was. That is the hygienic factor. This is why diversity and multitude of journalistic competitors is so important for democracy. And this again is understood now by the political class, socialists and Christian Democrats in most cases. There are pirates everywhere, but in most cases, this is why the Commission has now proposed this. Spain has the best modern copyright law, and it is working, although Google and Facebook say it's not working. Yes, it is working. Slowly, but it is working. And in order to avoid a patchwork, the European Commission has made this proposal, and it will hopefully pass the Council. If not, yes, then we open another big door to fake news and all the problems described here. Thank you very much.
Yes, maybe just going back to what you were saying about how we as journalists and editors should behave. I can tell you the story of what happened to us after the attacks in Paris in January and November 2015. At this moment, there were a lot of false information circulating on the web. A lot of people were saying that this and this happened in these different parts of the city, and we were covering live these events on the website. And it transformed the way we work, because we had to say, we don't know. We don't know. And it's strange for a journalist to publish online and to say, okay, you're saying that there is an attack in this part of the city and we don't have the answer. But then what we did is we said, we don't know, and we're going to send someone to this place to see if it's happening. And I guess this is the key, exactly what you're saying, which is we have to reinvent the way we do journalism. We can't do it the old way. It's not working for the audience we want to talk to. But at the same time, we have to use the strength and the professionalism of all the other generations of journalism. And the first one and the most important one is we have to send people on the field to see what's happening. And this, of course, because publishers had no money and had to make huge budget cuts, and we did the same at Le Monde. We had to make huge budget cuts, otherwise I wouldn't be here today, or I would be here as working for a PR firm. And so that's a difficult issue. We have to invest in journalism. We have to invest in field reporting. But at the same time, we have to find the right way to bring this to the audience. And so this brings back to the question that we were debating, which is how do we sustain our business models? How do we keep on living? And I agree with Florian that it's key that people understand that subscribing to media companies is really important, because this is what builds trust, and this is what allows us to have a sustainable business model. But we're not quite there yet. We're not quite there yet on digital. Some companies like Axel Springer are doing really well on that. We're not bad. But in a lot of European countries, people are not yet willing to pay for news. And now they are okay to pay for their music on Spotify. They are okay to pay for Netflix. It's also on our side, we have to find the right way to make them pay and that it's worth it. Here again, and I'm not want to bring Facebook back again, but the conversation we're having with Facebook and Google on this issue is also very complicated. We need them because this is how we can talk to a lot of people. So we need the programs of Facebook and Google called Instant Articles or AMP or else to allow publishers to have subscriptions, which is not the case today. And so, again, we need to work this issue together. Otherwise, we will not be able to provide content, and you will not be able to have good quality content. So we have common interest. We just can't find the good way to talk about it. But again, I think we'll find it in the next months.
Ms. Brodnig?
I just wanted to say that I liked your comment that another word for fake news would actually be lies. I think it's the best other word for it, because when it's deliberately faked, it's a lie. But if you want to go more into detail about the sheer scope of misinformation online, I suggest that you Google 7 types of mis and disinformation by First Draft News. They have a typology, 7 categories of misleading content, from not so harmful to really, really harmful. And what is interesting about this typology is that one of the characteristics, or one of the types there, are misleading headlines. And we must say that misleading headlines are something that is often not fabricated by alternative media, new outlets, but by traditional media. So I think it's totally wrong to just discuss this problem by only looking at the at new websites and saying, oh yeah, this is a completely new problem. We have parts of traditional journalistic media organizations who are part of the problem. And of course, every news organization sometimes makes something that is wrong, but we know that there are traditional journalistic outlets who do it very often and who have a business model around that. It's not ideologically necessary, but it's a problem. And I think when you said what should traditional media organization or we as journalists do, I think we are in this situation because we as journalists and we as media organizations have not created a media system in which our audience is able to understand when something sounds funny. I'm a journalist and I often speak with people who fall for fake news. And it's interesting how bad even normal, well-educated people are in reading news. And I think the reason behind that is that journalism in itself has not given this understanding to readers. Let me give you an example. When I was a young journalist, I wrote an article and I included the information of a study. And then I even included the information which university had written this study. And then my boss, he came to me and said, yeah, this is too complicated, we have to delete the name of the university. And I said, why? Because I want that my readers, when they are interested, they can Google it. And if I include the name of the university, it's easier for them to find it. And he said, no, because, you know, we are the journalists, and our readers, they have to trust us. They have to trust us that we don't make it up, but that we are quoting it correctly. And I said, no, but I don't want the readers to trust me. I want my readers to be well informed and read what I'm writing about. If somebody really wants to know what I'm quoting, which study I'm using, please, here's the information. And I think that in traditional journalism, we have had a system in which we do not empower our readers to be more critical thinking, to be more well-informed, but to just trust us. And now we have new players, and they say, hey, trust us, we are telling the truth. So I think part of the problem is the traditional media organizations, and to put it quickly, what would happen if the golden times would return, and would the media organizations invest all of that in fact-checking teams? I don't think so.
Yes,
If
yes.
If you look at the numbers, who is now building up fact-checking teams? I must say many fact-checking teams are made by public broadcasting companies, are made by new players like Correctiv in Germany, like new websites like Mimikama in Austria. It's often not traditional media organizations who do the fact-checking. Some are, but many are not. And I think that there could be much more done, even at the financial limits today, and things are not done as strongly as they could be.
Yes, my name is Neva Miklarčić-Pridan. Yeah. President of a human rights organization in Slovenia, Helsinki Monitor, and today many panels showed that it is the question of truth and not only fake news, but in general. So fake news now, the people who comment it show that it is not only a problem of the internet media, but also of, mainstream media, and that this is not a new problem, but an old one, and that the values, now the European Union would like to introduce more values in this system. If we just remember in 2009, ClimateGate, and now the flood of, articles trying to convince everybody that the ClimateGate has never occurred. So this is a very important question for the civilian society, and we have a flood of fake news in this field, and we live quite for some decades, and we look at the sky today and we remember the sky in previous times, etc. So this is a very wide question which should finally be put on table, and not that certain questions are forbidden and we may not even speak of them, and the media are forced practically to say one and the same story all the time.
No,
of this.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Of course we can talk about everything. Where you come from, of course, there's no forbidden question. Please.
So this is what I wanted to say.
Gregor Zamuda, Slovenian Press Agency. One aspect I think that we really didn't touch on, it was mentioned very early in the debate, was censorship. Like dominant discourse, the discourse of the establishment is something that we all share without even knowing. And Google, I read this recently in an article, in April they announced a change of their search algorithms. And this, within 3 months, it resulted in significant declines in readership of Even, let's say, mainstream left-wing or right-wing, Amnesty International was affected, Democracy Now!, everything that's not really mainstream dominant discourse, you know, and I think this is a danger that also needs to be reflected on, and fake news can play a role here, I think.
We'll pick just one last question for O2 from the audience.
Yeah, Goraz Dukovic, also from the Slovenian press agency. I would like a question regarding, there was some historical aspect being mentioned over there from the 19th century tabloids, but the fact is that historically speaking, fake news has been the norm, not the exception. So I'm wondering, I mean, scientists have been labeled crazy, have been outcasts. Why are we surprised? Why is this a debate? I mean, in the sense that science is being questioned today. Is this really something that's surprising to people? This has been the norm throughout history. It has.
Well, thank you for the comments. We're running a bit late, and maybe we should all just conclude with a very simple $1 billion question for each of you. And yes, we're addressing decision makers. And if you had like a couple of sentences to say, what is at stake, what would you say? And we start with on this side now. Just what is at stake?
Maybe I will ask, I will give an answer to the colleague over there who asked about the 19th century in a couple of sentences. I agree. Previously, it was called not fake news, but propaganda. And this is what we are dealing with today. It changed in a way that people, because people are living in their bubbles and they are just living in the internet communities, they don't see any other reality than this propaganda, and this is the problem in our world. And as we can see, I'm pessimistic. Most of the people here were optimistic today. I hope maybe next, if I join you next year here on this stage, I will be optimistic as you are. I hope. That's my hope.
Now, freedom of speech is first, and taboos, they're not in a free society of free media. But the ownership of what we produce belongs to the publisher and the author. This is why this regulation is important. Then we will have competing diversity of journalistic offers that will hopefully correct each other when too many lies and stories and taboos come from here and there. That is the competition our free societies need. And the rest, the use and love for fake and lies, this seems to be deep in the human nature. Who will prohibit it? What ministry will rule against it? So we need the option and the offer of professionally checked. Remember Watergate film, when these young journalists had to go out again and again to triply check. Give me 3 sources, said the chief editor. That is professionally fact-checked service, and that is a price. Thank you very much.
Your question was, what is at stake? I would say that a fair democratic debate is at stake. And of course, we never lived in a democracy where there were no fouls or no unfair arguments. But there is the danger that there is a new law and that the idea of the existence of fact itself is being disputed. And this makes all democratic discourse impossible. Because in order to have a democratic debate, we need to have established the common idea that there are certain facts, whether you like them or not, they are there. As you said, science is, whether you believe in it or not, it's true. And if you have a political debate where you just can make up everything and everything has the same value, you cannot debate anymore. For example, I'm not fond that Donald Trump has become United States president, but it's a fact and I have to accept it. And today, just like today or in the last 2 days, there was a new study coming out from Yale, and it showed that one of the biggest problems that lead to people falling for fake news is actually a lack of analytical thinking. So voters who show high analytical thinking, who are really thinking about, is this logical what I'm reading, they are less often falling victims of fake news. And I think this shows that when you're a person that has learned to really question everything that you see, you're less vulnerable. And the interesting thing about this study is it showed that in the Trump voters, in the people who voted for Trump, there were bigger problems. The study showed that there were some effects not that strongly, but even among the Trump voters, those Trump voters who have a strong analytical thinking, they less often believed in fake news. And so I think that our whole democratic debate is at stake, and what can we do about it? For example, I think we need an education where students learn analytical thinking. We need a journalism which helps readers remember critical thinking and analytical thinking, and we can do much more to enhance that.
What is at stake? I think informed society is at stake, and our ability to formulate our opinion freely and in an integral way. And what people in the audience touched upon, I think that's it's very important. We are talking about established media businesses here, and since there is a digital world out there, there are non-established media. There are bloggers. There are citizens journalism. And if we were sitting here 5-6 years ago, then this night session would have been about citizen journalism, because that was the hype of that times. And what we are talking about now, when we are talking about governments coming and heavily regulating what is considered to be fake news, what is not mainstream thinking, that can very quickly curb freedom of expression, especially in countries and territories where, let's say, democracy is not that deeply embedded, but even in very deep democratic societies. There's another side of this question I want to quickly touch, because money talks, because money is important. And we couldn't really finish the discussion on money, how traditional and non-traditional media makes money, because to have an investigative journalism to be sent out and find out about state corruption, having journalists be sent to the recesses of the world, you need money to do that. To discover the full truth, to do the alternative perspectives, you need money for that, money and time. I'm not sure, with due respect, whether the copyright issue here is the topical issue. It is a hugely important issue, but when you start paying copyright fee for snippets, then you do two things. You start taking away money and audience from smaller mediums, because money means that less people will click on their content. And the other side is that you start financing hoaxes and those outlets that are publishing fake news, because they as well have copyrighted content. But money is much more complex than just the copyright issue. And when we talk about money and how mainstream media, how the media and publishing industry can be financed, that is, again, not a kind of a one solution fits all. Publishers think about prescription models. Well, why would you pay for something that for a long time you got it for free? But still, we see more and more outlets introducing subscription models. And it was just announced by Mark 2 weeks ago that when user clicks on content that takes them to subscription sites, then Facebook takes no charge. All the 100% of the subscription fee goes to the publisher. How can you know that what content you read? Now you get the branded content in search. It is just small steps, but publishers have different business models, and our task and what we do now in this news integrity project is that we try to find out that what type of models, what type of financing, what type of cooperation on the financial model side can work for each different business models. Some like ads in videos, some like ads in instant articles, some like the subscription fee. It will be a colorful set. What is important that we have to get the financing for serious journalism. And that's a task for us, for both of us, and as well for governments, but maybe not as in the form of government direct censorship.
So first, I'm very happy about the comments of the colleagues from the Slovene press agency. I think they are fully right. We should take this not as extraordinary, but as normal. Yeah, and every media brand, every trusted media brand is a fact-checking organization by breed. So it's nothing very special that we're doing fact-checking. We have done that all the time, and we will do it in the future. What is at stake? I think that our democracies, as we love to live in and we want to render to our children, has an ultimate linkage to the free media and the plurality of media. So we don't have a crisis of journalism, of course not. Yeah, we have a crisis of financing this journalism. So what is at stake is it will be so if this goes on like this, it will be a heavy impact on our democracies. I think the remedy is finding solutions with those who earn the money with our content and with maybe with the regulations that made on the EU level or on the state level, that media can flourish and reinvest their money into that what is really needed to do good journalism.
Not to repeat the thoughts of my colleagues, obviously a lot is at stake. I think there are no quick solutions to it. It comes down to professionalism, transparency, accountability, and trust. And also, going back to the colleague who was talking about Russia's propaganda machine, you know, what Russia, their public diplomacy, other efforts, what they're good at is getting their narrative across. I think we have a problem with that. EU, NATO, nation states, are we good at getting our narrative across? Are we good at engaging with our public? We are just trying to communicate. Are we engaged with them? I think this is a task which is very difficult, but it's also the one that we have to address. We don't have Russia today, which claims of having an audience of 700,000 people. I think it's somewhere around that. So we cannot address this question the way that Russia is addressing it. But my main point would also be, so getting our narrative across and engaging with our audience. Not just saying, this is who we are, this is what we stand for, but also listening to the audience, engaging with them.
I'll be quick. What Ingrid said, democracy is at stake. We need critical thinking, otherwise democracy doesn't work. To have critical thinking, we need a press that functions and that works, and we need it to be sustainable. That's it.
What's at stake? Well, the Enlightenment is at stake. Nothing much, really. And the world is witnessing a populist surge that is like nothing we've seen for more than 50 years. And we need to do something about it. And we've concentrated this evening on what I would call the supply side of things, the journalistic models, the government questions, regulation, the tech giants, and so on. But for those of you decision makers who've been kind enough to stay up this late, my
parting thought is to say, don't forget, as it were, the demand side and where it begins, which is in the classroom. We need to raise our children not as citizen journalists anymore, but as citizen editors, and give them a kind of digital literacy that will make them understand that the greatest sin of populism is to pretend that a complex world is simple. And if we can help them to do that and to find their way around the Babylon of the modern internet, we will have done them at least a service of giving them the chance of living in a better world. Thank you.
Well, thank you really very much to all the panelists and to all of you to actually have, the energy and patience to stay with us so late. And tomorrow I hope you won't be too tired for the next great panels and sessions. So that's from our side. Thank you again. Of course, this is an ongoing debate. And that's it for tonight. Thank you.